Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Abbey Road is a great album, but what song was the favorite from each member of the band? We're going to find out now. John's favorite song. John loved the song Come Together. It hit number 1 on the U.S. charts in November 1969. John was a big critic of his and other Beatles songs, but this is the one song he loved. John felt like George Martin heavily produced the Beatles albums, and he wanted a more rock and roll sound like Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley. According to CheatSheet.com, when it came time to start recording Come Together, John greeted everyone in the studio with an announcement. "Okay, lads, I'm ready. Time to let your hair down and do some rock and roll," he said. So John and Yoko had been recovering from a car accident in the previous weeks. It sounded way too much like a Chuck Berry song, according to George Harrison and Paul McCartney. They decided to slow it down, and Paul added his classic bass line. Paul McCartney recalled in Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Songs, he said, "Let's slow it down with the swampy bass and drums vibe. I came up with the bass line, and it all flowed from there." And John told Playboy's David Sheff it was a career highlight. "It's a funky record," he said. "It's one of my favorite Beatles tracks, or one of my favorite Lennon tracks. Let's say that. It's funky, it's bluesy, and I'm singing it pretty well. I like the sound of the record. You can dance to it. I'd buy it." And then John recalled in a 1980 interview with Playboy magazine, "The thing was created in the studio. It was gobbledygook. Come Together was an expression that Tim Leary had come up with, perhaps for the governorship of California against Reagan, and he asked me to write a campaign song. I tried and I tried, but I couldn't come up with one. But I came up with this, Come Together, which would have been no good to him. You couldn't have a campaign song like that, right?" So a rotary phone was used to make the sound heard before each verse and after the chorus, and the sound was accompanied by the bass that Paul played. And Paul McCartney would later claim that Yoko had an influence over the lyrics as well. "I wouldn't mind betting Yoko was in the writing of that," he told Barry Miles. "It was rather her kind of writing. Wind, sky, and earth are reoccurring. It's straight out of Yoko's book Grapefruit, and John was heavily influenced by her at that time." And this was John's last number 1 song with the Beatles. So Paul McCartney's favorite song from Abbey Road? His favorite song is Come Together, too. McCartney made some suggestions during the recording session that turned Come Together into the rock hit known today. In the Barry Miles book, Many Years From Now, McCartney explained how the song was influenced by Chuck Berry and how he wanted to move away from that style. So John originally brought it over as a very perky little song, and I pointed out to him, "This is very similar to Chuck Berry's You Can't Catch Me," McCartney stated. John acknowledged it was rather close to it, so I said, "Well, anything you can do to get away from that?" I suggested we try swampy. Swampy was the word I used, so we did. We took it right down. I laid that bass line down, which very much makes the mood. It's actually a bass line that people now use very often in rap records. If it's not a sample, they use that riff, but that was my contribution to that. And in 1970 interview with the Evening Standard, McCartney wished he had contributed even further to Come Together. On Come Together, I would have liked to sing the harmony with John, and I think he would have liked me doing it too, but I was too embarrassed to ask him, and I don't work the best of my abilities in that situation, McCartney admitted. And George Harrison's favorite song? Because was George's favorite song from the Abbey Road album. Because was the last song recorded on the album, and according to Far Out magazine, the harpsichord began the song, and it was a song of 3-part harmony. The track came to Lennon after Yoko Ono, a trained classical pianist, performed Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata for him one day in 1969. Laying supine on a nearby couch, Lennon asked Ono to play the chords in reverse. It was a trick Paul McCartney had used for Blackbird, and it worked, a trick giving birth to Because. George was charmed by the simplicity of Lennon's lyrics. "I think this is possibly my favorite one on the album because it's just so simple," he said. "The lyrics are so simple, featuring just 5 lines. Because is at once uncomplicated and oblique. Ah, because the world is round, it turns me on." Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison sing in unison. "Because the wind is high, it blows my mind." So Ringo Starr's favorite song. Ringo stated that Come Together was his favorite Beatles song. From not just the Abbey Road album, but for all the Beatles albums. So he was asked by Stephen Colbert if he had to listen to one song for the rest of his life, and he said, "The Beatles Come Together." There's lots of other favorites, but if you want one, Come Together Can't Be Bad, Starr said, noting it was his favorite Beatles song. I just think it worked perfectly, the band and the song and John being John. I love that moment. So Ringo did some incredible drum work on the Abbey Road album. According to CheatSheets.com, Come Together and the drum solo at the end that he shied away from performing are obvious examples. Yet Ringo also adds deft drum work to George Harrison's tender ballad Something, and he goes all out on side 2 melody. Songs such as You Never Give Me Your Money, Polythene Pam, and Carry That Weight are powerful Ringo performances. It might be why he called the melody his favorite album moment with the Beatles. And Ringo said that Abbey Road was a special album to him for a selfish reason. Ringo said that one of the most self-centered memories was, I had this new kit, the maple kit we called it because it was made of maple and it had cloth heads. I never had cloth heads before in all those years. They were always plastic, and the depth of them blew me away. So if you listen to that album, every track was Tom Tom Boogie on it, and Bathroom Window is a fine example. So it's amazing that 3 out of the 4 Beatles pick Come Together as their favorite song. It is understandable because it's a rock and roll song. It was Chuck Berry-inspired song that ended up with John having to pay out a settlement. He just couldn't let go of the song. So George Harrison, I suspect, loved the song too, but he was so fond of singing harmony songs with the Beatles, it's no wonder he chose Because as his favorite song. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. If you haven't clicked on the notification bell, if you would do so, you can find out when new videos are released. And I hope everybody's been having a good day. Tune in again soon for another episode of the Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.